Happy Sunday, everybody. It seemed like a good day to do what I've been meaning to do, which is talk a little bit about this deck of cards that my good friend Jack from Boston mailed to me a couple years ago now. I'm going to give just a little piece about the cards, and in doing so, remind you that in fact these cards are used in my newest book, which is only available electronically as an ebook, called Then, Now, and In Between. And then secondly, I am kicking off a St. Paddy's Day Special, where you can now get that for almost half price, so $4.99, through all sellers. So if you go to Amazon, you can get it at Amazon, but if you prefer supporting other smaller distributors, all of those, the price is now $4.99 for that book. And I'll tell you more about that. It should go into effect, probably you'll start to see it tomorrow, and it'll be through the end of March. I almost thought of calling it the virus special, but that sounded really weird, and I don't mean that, so I'm not doing that. But let's talk about this deck of cards. And a couple years ago, I got a wonderful package in the mail from a work colleague of mine who had uncovered this deck of cards, Portland and Columbia River souvenir playing cards. Every card is there. And you probably couldn't see on that, but it's a 1909 copyright date. I've had the cards for a while, and I've done a blog, and I'll certainly put a post up on my blog tomorrow that would take you back to the original blog where you can actually look at each image if you're curious. And then also, within my new book, let me just get to a certain page here. I can show you that I use a handful of those cards, probably 12 maybe, or 15, I can't remember exactly, in terms of where I was lucky enough to have a blog post and a card that was the same location. So mostly those cards are within my first section of the book, which is under place, but not entirely. So you can see, for example, Biddle's Rock, a beacon of the gorge, was in fact, I used this image, which you can't see it really well here, but it is actually on here called Castle Rock, which was the name of it originally before we went back to Beacon Rock, which was originally written down in Lewis and Clark journals as Beaten Rock, which they felt was an error. The cards, just real quick, Jack had found in a trunk of his mother's after she passed. And if I remember right, and Jack can correct this, he kind of surmised that it had come from his grandmother who had lived in the Bay Area and had probably traveled by train up to Seattle or Washington State, and kind of during this era of the early 1900s, and had picked up this deck of playing cards. And I would imagine because of the 1905 Lewis and Clark exposition in Portland, which I write about in my memoir briefly, but we know that brought a lot of people kind of new to Portland to visit. And then shortly after, quite a number of new people moved here. And I'm sure that brought a lot of interest to this part of Oregon. The cards, well, let me tell you just a minute. I did look it up. So the United States Playing Card Company began as an offshoot of a printing business founded in Cincinnati in 1867 by four men named Russell, Morgan, Armstrong, and Robinson. In 1880, Russell, Morgan, and Company decided to enter the playing card business, then an industry dominated by companies on the East Coast. And this was, of course, out of Cincinnati, as you can actually see on this, the deck itself. 1909, as I'd said. The company's first deck of playing cards was produced on June 21st, 1881. Soon thereafter, the company was employing 20 people for the operation and producing 1,600 decks of playing cards per day, which seems like a lot. Eventually, the company also started to produce the bicycle brand, which is certainly a popular brand of playing cards that would have images of a bicycle in a mirror image. And I know I've seen those over the years. My grandparents were big card players, so I remember there having many decks of cards in their house when I was growing up. Although I bet they had this deck, but I never saw it through them. So again, I thank Mike Jack. You're so kind to give these to me. You can see these on eBay for partial packs. I wouldn't say I've seen them for a big price, but I think what they are is really cool. So I just want to show you just a couple of these images. So what's interesting about them is every suit is a different category, you could say. And then of course every image, or rather every card, has actually a different image on it. So diamonds are really kind of places. So I already showed you what we would call Beacon Rock, or Castle Rock, as it was known in, what did I say, that 1909. My favorite, and I do use this also in my book, is our wonderful Willamette Falls, Oregon, with the log booms, and you can see a steamboat, and you can see the paper companies. So that is the Jack of Diamonds. And then you can see on the back of all of these is, of course, an image of Mount Hood and our roses, our beautiful roses. I'll show you one more that's lovely, and many boats and kind of coastal places. And it seems like in the Diamonds suit. So this is Cascade Locks, Columbia River. Once we jump to hearts, hearts kind of tends to be buildings and places in Portland. So we certainly have 8 of hearts, and I use this in my book as well, Union Depot, in that era of the early 1900s. And then I certainly like this one of Morrison Street. And I believe I use this image in one of the blogs where I'm talking about J.K. Gill in his bookstore, so that we got a sense of kind of the downtown Portland area with the streetcar. And you can see a carriage. So those are hearts. Hearts are all kinds of buildings in Portland. The Chamber of Commerce. And again, I'll link to my blog if you're curious to see all of the images. Real quickly here, because I don't want this video to go on too long. But then when we jump into spades, it's kind of a different kind of mix. One of my favorites is this decorated fire truck for the Rose Festival, right? So still an important event then, a different era, different floats. And this is certainly, we see differences, and I don't think the statue, well, I don't know if the statue is still there, but I remember this very much as a child, the Sacagawea monument that was at Washington Park. And I'm pretty sure that's been replaced. Finally, we get to clubs, which are more sites. So we have Cannon Beach as 5 of clubs. You can see a horseback rider there. And we do have Multnomah Falls in here somewhere. I didn't pull it out. But here is certainly the U.S. Cruiser Chicago. So that's a handful of them. I think they're really cool. I have asked the Historical Society if they're interested. I mean, I think they shouldn't probably just be in my hands because they're kind of cool. But so far, I haven't really had any takers. So if you know a nice place that they can be preserved, please let me know. I probably should be wearing white gloves, but I don't operate. I never learned that skill very well. So sorry about that. So with that, I will leave you about the deck of cards. I will go ahead and post this on my blog. I'll share it out on Facebook, but I'll put it in my next blog that I'll post later today with a couple links to my book if you're interested in looking where you can buy those St. Paddy's Day Special copies to check it out. Again, the book I'm talking about there is Then, Now, and In Between, Place, Memories, and Loss in Oregon. And otherwise, thinking about everybody. Let's be kind. Think of creative ways to still connect with each other, even if we're at home alone, or trying to help support other people that may need more help while they are alone or in isolation. And lots of hope and love to everybody right now. Thanks for listening.